How on earth does a tiny, persecuted religious movement born in some forgotten corner of the Roman Empire grow up to become the biggest religion in the world? It's seriously one of the greatest puzzles in all of history, and today, we're going to try to piece it together.
So to get to the bottom of this, we've got to look at two men. They're living around the same time, and believe it or not, they were both called Son of God. On one side, you've got Augustus Caesar. I mean, this guy is the most powerful man on the planet, his divinity literally stamped onto the money. And on the other side, a poor, traveling preacher from a backwater province called Judea.
Right, so here's the kicker. One of them had all the power, all the armies, the whole shebang. The other was seen as such a threat to that power that they had him killed. So how in the world did the story of the rebel, and not the emperor, completely take over and change history forever? That's the question we're digging into today.
All right, let's dive in. To really get this, we have to kind of step back in time and understand the world they were both living in. It's a wild story of power, faith, and some seriously radical ideas. And look, you just can't understand Christianity if you don't first get Judaism. It's that simple. Jesus was a Jew, he lived his whole life as a Jew, and his teachings were completely soaked in Jewish tradition. So let's break down the core ideas that shaped his entire view of the world. First up, and you have to understand this was absolutely mind-blowing at the time, was monotheism. The rest of the world, the Romans, the Greeks, they had tons of gods. A god for the sea, a god for war, a god for wine. The Hebrews came along with this totally revolutionary idea. Nope, there's only one. Just one all-powerful God. The second big idea, it's called the covenant. You can think of it like a sacred contract, a special deal that God made with this guy Abraham. God promised to make his descendants a great nation, and in return, they would be his people. This is the origin story, right? This is where that idea of a chosen people really starts.
So, what was this one God all about? Well, here's the crucial part, especially for where our story is heading. This God wasn't just about rituals and sacrifices. He demanded two things above all else: that you act morally and that you fight for social justice. This wasn't some far-off deity on a cloud. This was a God who was deeply invested in how people, especially the poor and the weak, were treated right here on earth. And that is the perfect setup for Jesus. He takes that foundation of caring for the poor and fighting for justice, and he just cranks it up to 11. He starts preaching a message that was, for the average person, incredibly powerful, and for the people in charge, incredibly dangerous. I mean, just listen to this. He was telling people that the poor were blessed, that the powerless would inherit the earth, and that the people on top would be brought low. This is a total inversion of the way the world worked. To the people at the bottom of Roman society, man, that must have sounded amazing, but to the people at the top, super threatening.
So let's be super clear here. From a purely historical standpoint, the Romans didn't care about the theology. They saw a guy stirring up the population and challenging their power. So they did what they always did to political troublemakers: they crucified him. It was a public execution meant to send a message.
Now, for this explainer, we're not talking about faith or theology. We're looking at this as historians. And from that point of view, what happens next is the real game changer. After he's dead, his small group of followers becomes absolutely convinced that he was the Messiah, the savior they had been waiting for. It's not about whether he was the Messiah, it's that his followers believed he was. That single belief, that's the spark that ignites everything. So, you've got this tiny spark. How does it become a wildfire that sweeps across the entire Roman world and beyond? Well, it turns out the conditions were just right. There were basically three key reasons this thing took off like a rocket. Okay, here's the recipe. First, the Jewish diaspora. A while back, the Romans had kicked the Jews out of their homeland, which accidentally created this network of Jewish communities all over the empire. Perfect little places for a new idea to take root. Second, this guy named Paul comes along and makes a hugely important call. And third, way down the line, the Roman Empire itself starts to crumble, and people are desperately looking for something new to believe in, some sense of hope, and this new faith is right there waiting. And let's just zoom in on that second point, because it is arguably the most important decision in the history of the religion. Paul's big idea was this: you don't have to become Jewish to follow Jesus. Anyone can join. This was huge. It took the movement from being a small internal Jewish thing and threw the doors wide open to literally the entire world. It was a total game changer. Okay, so this brings us to the final act. And honestly, it's the biggest plot twist in the whole story. We're talking about the incredible, ironic transformation of this faith, from a persecuted movement
to the official religion of the very empire that killed its founder.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It's wild. You go from Jesus being executed to nearly 300 years of Christians being a persecuted minority, sometimes hunted down, thrown to lions, you name it. And then suddenly, bam, the Roman emperor himself, a guy named Constantine, converts. In that single moment, everything flips on a dime.
And that's the bottom line. Once you have the most powerful man in the world on your side, you're not the underdog anymore. You're the establishment. The persecuted sect becomes the official religion of power, backed by the Roman state. And from that point on, its future as a dominant world force was pretty much guaranteed.
It's just an absolutely incredible story, isn't it? How a small belief, held by a handful of people in a forgotten corner of the world, could ripple out and completely reshape civilization. And it really makes you wonder, right? What would our world even look like today if that one Roman emperor, all those years ago, had just chosen differently? Something to think about.